there's the Bedford to Brighton line. Just over the top of that ridge there is the very arse end of Sundon Pit. And here's the M1. Now, that might not be the most beautiful start to a video, but I've been looking forward to this one. I've saved it. I saved it for a week after I've just done 12 days on the trot at work without a break. Let's leave all that busyness behind us and we'll go and have a look at the River Flitt. It's a busy little spot, this. Just over the motorway, down towards the village of Chalton. Over there is an enormous National Grid substation. And just behind there is a massive sewage works. And trust me, you can smell the sewage works. It's hanging pretty heavy on the air. Now the River Flitt, its source is just a couple of 100 metres from here on the other side of the motorway. It actually comes up in a pond on the land that belongs to the old Exodus farm. Just as you come off the roundabout there's a little, what used to be a small holding on the left. And then that Exodus bunch got their hands on it, and these days it seems to be used for vehicle storage up one end. They've got some horses being paddocked down the other end. That's private land, so we can't get in there. You can see it on Google Maps, nice little horse pond, but it comes under the motorway and then it starts to just wriggle its way through down here. Just over by that little cluster of trees there's a big pond, a massive great big pond. I think it's just a man-made motorway runoff collection point. You know, I can see on Google Maps it's got a lot of little drains coming into it. Now the actual source of the River Flitt that comes down from the farm runs alongside that, along there. But there are also multiple other little channels that run down to it, and we've got one right here that's just passed under the motorway where I've just crossed over. Here's our first little bit of running River Flitt. Not much to speak of at this stage. It's not a chalk stream either. Comes down through there. It runs along the side of this path, where it then joins the actual main River Flitt that's come down from the farm along there. We're going to join up with it just about there. Well, I have to say, this is definitely one of the grimmest beginnings of a river that I've ever had to come and visit. Right next to the M1 here, and it absolutely stinks as we're getting towards the sewage works. It absolutely reeks. It's horrible. You've got all these old, they look like 1950s, don't they? They look sort of very military or institutional. They're just outbuildings connected to the massive substation. Now, do I actually want to go? It looks like there's constant works going on here. There was a JCB just up there, wasn't there? And they're laying down pipes, laying down new pipe work, or is that cabling? One of the two. Over there. Oh, Jesus, that smell. Right, I don't want to hang around here too long. We're not going to take, there is a footpath there, we're not going to take that one. We're going to go this side. Oh, whiffy, whiffy. I've just managed to get down to that little tributary next to the path that runs down to the actual Flitt. Very nice down there, some old trees, lots of roots growing into it. I'm really hoping that this isn't used as an overspill or an overflow for the sewage works, because I've just been paddling in it. Right, so there's our little brook coming down and joining with the young River Flitt. Now looking at it, here, the actual bit of the River Flitt does look like it's getting very close to a chalk stream. I think it probably technically is. It is chalky and stony at the bottom and the water's very clear. Right, it goes off that way in the direction of Chalton. That's the village where I've just parked up to come and have a look. As you've probably deduced, Chalton is one of those really nice little villages, but which has been kind of ruined by a massive road, in this case the M1 over there, being run right alongside it. And I'm guessing they're not too chuffed about those sewage works either, because it really does stink and it's not even a hot day. Now just about maybe a mile and a half away from Chalton, maybe even a bit less than that, up on top of the hill towards Toddington, there's a little hamlet called Chalgrave. Now being so close together and having Chalton and Chalgrave, you'd have thought they'd be somehow linked, at least, you know, sort of linguistically or whatever, but they're not at all, despite their proximity to each other. Chalton is the, well, the chal bit, actually derives from calf, kelf or something in Old English. So it means the little homestead, the little farm where calves were raised. Now just up the top of the hill at Chalgrave, it's got a completely different origin. Chalgrave up there means chalk pit. Grave meaning pit, chal being chalk. I was very surprised to find that. Now the river goes off in that direction, where it follows the M1 for a little bit, then it crosses back under the M1 by Toddington Services. And after that it pretty much just goes through farmland. There's very little access along the way. It's a shame. I'd love to see the point where it passes under the M1, but it's not accessible by the looks of it. So from that funny little beginning to a river, not the usual sort of place you'd expect to find a nice little chalk stream. Don't worry, it gets much nicer. Now next we're off to Flitwick Moor. Footpath just comes out in the pub car park here, look. I won't stop. The star. There you go, right. So I'm going to find my way over to Flitwick Moor. And I know it's lovely over there, because I went there as a kid. And I can remember bits and pieces of it. That's a bit more like it. We're at Flitwick Moor now. A few miles down the River Flitt. Now I did come here as a kid, and what I remember was the red waters. You've got these iron-rich, peaty red waters. Now having a look at this little sign here, they seem to be what's known as Chalybeate Springs. So I'm going to walk along the edge of the forest that way, see if we can find those springs. I was going to bring my tin cup with me, because they used to sell them as a blood tonic until about the 1930s. I was going to bring my little tin cup and partake of the waters, but I forgot, so I'll have to make do with my hand. That's odd. What that's all about. I can see another one over there. There's a few of them. I've got no idea. Absolutely no idea. Something children have made by the looks of it. What's that? Fanny? Over here we've got... Ah, they're all around. Grace. And then there's more over there, look. No idea. These red springs that I'm looking for, they run just down through the trees to the River Flitt, which sits just to our south. I've just seen a puffball. There it is. Yeah, these red springs, they run sort of south down through the woods to the River Flitt, which sits just a little way over there. And it runs through an area of historic peat extraction. There's a lot of sphagnum moss, apparently, and it turns into peat pretty quickly. I thought peat took a hell of a long time to form, but apparently not, because the peat that's been dug up here, they found Roman ruins under it. So, you know, you're only looking not even 2,000 years old. That peat's formed, but it was being dug out as fuel. Dug out in blocks and dried to be used as fuel. Once we found those red springs, we'll follow the watercourse down to the River Flitt and see what it looks like in this neck of the woods. Now, I wish I'd examined that little information board a bit more closely. It looks like I've found those springs. They seem to be rising in various little patches and pools in this part of the woods. You can see basically where the green grassy patches are, and there's sedge growing in bits of it as well. This is all this green here. This is all more springs. You can see that somebody in the past's been taking advantage of the water in a tank, although it's not flowing. It will be flowing soon as we get nearer to the River Flitt. It's just all sitting here looking a bit red and rusty and stagnant, so I'm not going to be drinking that. I say rusty, actually. It smells of rust here. It actually smells of rust. It smells like an untidy corner in a workshop. You can actually smell the iron in the water. Now look under this beech tree, look. Been blown over. I'm guessing its roots weren't particularly firm, because they were sitting right on top of the water table. Blown over and left a... Oh, I can see all sorts of life wriggling around in there. Don't know if you can. I'll probably just scared them all off. This seems to be one of the main... Oh, it's all very marshy. Can you hear me feet? This seems to be one of the main runoffs from the springs that goes down to the river. There's so much moss around. You can see where all the peat comes from. Got this sphagnum moss growing everywhere. There's some horse's hoof fungus. Moss galore. Now, I'm not going to follow this little tributary down to the river, because it goes through some pretty dense woodland and it's off the footpath. And this is a nature reserve, so I'm not sure I really want to go trampling all over that sort of mossy habitat. I'm going to turn around and stick to the path. You can see how dark the water is. Very peaty here. I know there are other sections where it looks really red and rusty. My place names book, when you look up Flitwick, by the way, don't ever come here and pronounce it Flitwick. They'll put you in the stocks for a fortnight Oh, I'll put you in the stocks for a fortnight if you come down here and call it Flitwick. Thank you, Harry Potter. When you look up the meaning of Flitwick, it says unknown origin. First element of unknown origin. Now the wick bit is known. Wick can mean two things. It can mean a dairy farm, or it can be a Saxon reference to an old Roman site. Now this is an old Roman site. There are plenty of Roman remains in this little corner. But the book claims that that first element, Flitt, is unknown. Well, whoever wrote that book, I won't say his name, I might embarrass him. The author of that book really didn't do his research very well, not to realise that the River Flitt runs straight through the middle of Flitwick. So you don't have to be a genius, do you? So where did the River Flitt get its name from? Well, I reckon, I've not found this out for sure, I've not actually come across anybody claiming this, but I reckon it's most likely from the old Anglo-Saxon Flitt, if that's how you pronounce it. It's spelled F-L-E-O-T, and I think it might actually be pronounced something along the lines of Flitt rather than Fliot, from what I've heard of pronunciations. But oh, here we go, looking nice and red here, look. Very red and irony. See if I can get across that. All brambles. Fliot is an old Anglo-Saxon word for a stream. It had a couple of similar uses. It could be a tidal inlet, but it was also used to describe a stream. Same origin as the River Fleet in London. The River Flitt and the River Fleet are probably both derived from that old Anglo-Saxon fleot. Whether or not all this bamboo is supposed to be here, I don't know. I would seriously doubt it, to be honest. Bamboo is so invasive. If this is a nature reserve, you'd imagine they'd be trying to get rid of the stuff. No, I would. Yeah, so sorry I didn't get a video out last weekend. Got a little bridge here, it must be boggy. I'm sorry I didn't get a video out last weekend. I was working, and I was actually forced to work 12 days on the trot, so I couldn't even get a day off either side of me weekend, you know, to get out for a walk. And that situation just makes me so miserable and puts me in so much pain. I've just spent the last 2 weeks working, sleeping and job hunting, which is sort of why I saved this walk for today, because I knew I was going to be stressed and achy and miserable, and there's a lot to look at on this walk, so I saved this one for today. That's very definitely peat there, look. Tree hugger. And this is where it all runs into, back down to the River Flitt. It's a reasonable sized river now. It's got a little bit of depth to it, good strong flow. Running through here at the bottom edge of Flitwick, and off in that direction towards Clop Hill, which is where we're going next. Because just next to Clop Hill, and I mentioned it very briefly when I went to Clop Hill Church that time, I mentioned it very briefly, there's a settlement there called Cainhoe Castle. It's a place that was abandoned because they all succumbed to the Black Death. So right, I'll walk back up through the woods. I'll take a slightly different route, I think. Back up to the car, and we'll make our way over to Cainhoe Castle. It is only a tiny little river really, the River Flitt. I can't imagine it's more than 20 miles long. It flows into the Great Ouse, as all of the ones on this north side of the Chaltons seem to. It flows into the River Great Ouse. Before it does so, it joins with a little neighbouring river called the River Hitt, the Flitt and the Hitt. And the River Hitt is very close by. It starts just up by Rest Park, and then it goes by a beautiful looking old ironstone church at Gravenhurst, and it's joined by the springs that come out of Barton Hills. You know, those really lovely gushing springs that we went to. The water from there ends up in the River Hitt, where it joins with the Flitt and onto the Great Ouse. So that's going to be another upcoming walk. We're going to follow the River Hitt. That's got some nice little spots on it. And it covers the very last section of the River Flitt, which we're not going to see today. It's a man-made part, actually. Anyway, we'll leave it for that video. It's a canal at the end. We're not going to get quite that far. I think that's a yellow wagtail. I'm actually finding these things damn creepy. What sort of hellish children have they got in Flitwick? Swiftly on. Although anybody from the area doesn't pronounce the W, nobody calls it Flitwick. There are one or two estates in Flitwick where they don't even pronounce the T. You can pop into the local post office and hear it referred to as Flick. And back at the Flitt. I'm hoping I've saved the best till last. I certainly hope so, because we ain't going anywhere else today. That's all the walking I can manage. There's a site through here that I've driven past loads of times, and I've mentioned it in another video previously. It's Cainhoe Castle. You can see it's got quite a flow to it. Here at Clop Hill. And I would imagine, looking at that bank opposite, in the winter, it's right up to the top there. Those goats think they're horses. Well, that was a longer walk than I expected. It's only 2:30 in the afternoon. Feels like it's getting dark already. But anyway, there's the castle, nearly there. There it is. It's quite a large one. We're actually standing in some sort of, it's either one of the fish ponds that were associated with it, or it's one of the ditches. Because it's a double Mott and Bailey. Well, sorry, it's a double Mott. It's got two sets of ditches and banks around it. It's quite similar to what would have been standing at Cainhoe Castle. A timber-built Norman stronghold installed by the Norman gentry. I actually forget the name of the Norman knight who founded this. It's thought in the 1190s. It was something ridiculous. This Norman knight, it was called Trevor or Rodney. It was something like that. It didn't seem very suitable for a knight of the realm. It's a Cainhoe Castle here, and the settlement that grew up around it, Cainhoe itself, presumably that meant hill spur settlement of a man called Cain. Possibly the same name derivation as the Cain who named Kensworth. I'm about halfway up. There's like the main Bailey. If you look down where I've just come up, you can see the two levels, two different lines of defence. Quite a large sort of plateau, really. Little plain built up to the front of it here, and I wonder if that's an old entrance. Look, got this wide opening heading off towards the river and Clophill. Maybe the pathway that I've just walked along might well have been the main approach to the fort. Right, now let's get up on top of, I can't see a path, I'm just going to have to crawl, I think. We'll get up on top of the main mound. Oh yes, very defensible. That's a steep incline, very steep. Nice little spot for a fort. Now you can see there's the sort of the inner Mott, and then the outer Mott's just down below that. And there were fish ponds as well. They had their own little set of fish ponds going on, and I can see various little lumps and ditches down there. Let's see what else you can see. Yep, that's great. You can see it all really nice and clearly. I'm standing up on top of the Bailey, and you can see sort of the inner Mott there stretching around, and you've got the outer one just beyond it. And look, down here at the bottom of the big mound, you've got a very deep ditch running along the edge. Just over there in the background you can see the existing quarry just over the back there, across the other side of the road. And down this side you've got some old quarrying pits, really, rather than quarries, which have been allowed to flood, and that's getting turned into a nature reserve. We've got this lovely oak, look, growing almost on the summit, not quite, very nearly on the top. I mean, really, it's as striking as Cainhoe Castle. About the same period, same sort of construction. It's very, very similar to Cainhoe Castle. And it was all abandoned by the 1370s. I think in 1370 it was discovered to be completely abandoned and derelict, because during the plague, the first plague, the one of 1350, the Black Death, everybody here succumbed to it. everybody who lived in the castle and everybody who lived in the village around it all died of the Black Death. That wasn't the very end. There was a medieval manor built, I'm not quite sure where, somewhere in these surrounding fields, very close by. There was a medieval manor, but that doesn't seem to have lasted all that long either, because there's no trace of it left. Apparently there are parch marks, there are parch marks in the ground, but no visible remains. There's lots of quite squarish and rectangular looking shapes down there, ditches and lumps. So I wonder if they might be the remains of the village or the medieval manor. All very uniform looking, you see. And I mustn't forget, look, just over there, across the river valley on the other side, that's Clophill Satanic Church. Barely a whisker away from there. But it was definitely worth the slightly painful walk. That's quite an impressive Norman castle. I really like that. As a timber one. Obviously there are stone Norman castles which are way more impressive because they're still standing. But even so, this site here, because it's so similar to other timber Norman sites that I know of, very nice to see. Right, that is very definitely enough for me today. That's a lot of geese. If anybody would like to set up a Patreon for me, donate me a few £100 a week, that'd be much appreciated, as I could give up my scum-sucking job and give them what for.